But today we do have to talk about the books that disappointed me in 2024. I did make a list of 10, so what is happening behind me? Apparently, my YouTube video decided that it needed to go on an ad break. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my disappointments for the year. So apologies for the bad lighting. I don't know where my lights, I know where my lights are. I can't get to my lights. So here we are, but we have a nice snowy background. You can kind of see behind us. Either way, I'm trying to lighten the mood because we're going to talk about books I didn't like. So there are 10 on this list, and some of them I feel like if you've been around here the entire year, it makes sense, you know this, and some of them might be surprises to you. So let's just dive in. I don't think there's really an order, except for I think it actually is an order from when I read them throughout the year, just because that's how I found them. I went through my Goodreads and reminded myself what I read this year. So actually there might be a little bit in order. It's not important. Also, fun fact, I don't own a single one of these books. I might have at one point, but not anymore, which I think is saying something. The first book is The Inadequate Heir by Daniel L. Jensen, which is the third in the Bridge Kingdom series. The Bridge Kingdom was a series that I had read the first two beginning of 2023, I think, because that's when I went into my huge romantasy phase, and this kind of was a little bit at the start of it, and I read the first two back to back and I loved them, and I was putting off reading the rest because they kind of go in twos where they follow the big overarching plot of the world, but they follow different characters. So in the first two books we followed one romance, and in the second two we follow another one. Same thing with the last two. So this was the start of the second two, and I went in with super high expectations and it was fine. I mean, I don't know, it's been a while since I've read this, but I just remember it not living up to how much I enjoyed the first two, and like the first two took me heart and soul. I was so obsessed with this world, and this one, it backtracked a little bit timeline-wise to kind of give our main characters a bit of a backstory, and then continued, and like all the elements were there for me to enjoy it, and I'm not entirely sure if I can pinpoint why I didn't. It just didn't work. And I think it's down to the hype. I hyped this up so much because the first two were so good that this one just kind of like suffered by comparison. So I haven't continued. And I need to, because like, I think this got 3 stars. Like, I do think it got a decent rating. I just don't remember anything from this now. So when I go into the fourth one, we're gonna be at a disadvantage because I don't remember, and I definitely don't want to reread it. So I'm gonna have to find a synopsis somewhere. Anyway, this has definitely derailed my reading of the series, so I think I'll continue at some point. I just don't know when. Watch future Kelsey decide to DNF this series. Anyway, that one just kind of like fell very flat. The next one is called Shadow of Night, which is by Deborah Harkness. It's the second in the All Saints series, the first one being Discovery of Witches, and this one is entirely because the first one was just so good. I loved the first one so much, and we backtracked with this one. It has a lot of historical elements, like there is some time travel in this one, which should have worked because it was a time period that I enjoy. So by all means it should have worked, but I think the author chose to focus on the wrong things. She focused really heavily on making our main characters fit in with society that I just didn't like it. Plus, our main character, like our main female lead, is such a powerful person, and like she takes a stand in the first book because our main male lead likes to kind of make he grew up at a different time, so he thinks that he has to protect her, and she's like, look, I can protect myself. And then we get into this one, and like it entirely backtracks. Like he becomes very like protective and almost alpha male, and she's like, okay, that's fine. And we completely forget that aspect of her character, and it doesn't really come back, not even in the third one. So there were elements in this that should have worked, but it just didn't, because the characters changed and we focused on the wrong parts. About halfway through the book is when I started to get invested in what was going on, and I was reading her vlog, which is why I continued. Otherwise, I probably would have DNF'd it. So this one just, yeah. This one was a no for me. The next one is Enchantment of Ravens, and this one is by an author that I've read something by, and now of course I'm blanking on the name, so of course you'll see it here. But I had read something else by this author and I really enjoyed it, and I thought, by all accounts, everything that was in this book I should have enjoyed. It was about fairies, it was a romance, you had a sassy main character, you had, you know, like he wanted it one way, and he had like a strong-willed female character who said, yeah, no, and so she did her own thing, and it should have been fantastic. And it was just kind of okay, and I think this one suffered from me not giving it enough attention while I was reading. I had the audiobook on, I was like doing other things. I think I used it while I was doing like housework and things, and I just found myself pushing myself through it. And I think there was a lot of elements in here that would have worked maybe if I'd given it more attention. It was YA, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, so it could have been a factor of that. But overall, like, it should have worked. It should have worked, and it didn't. There was a bunch of factors that could have factored in to this not working, but I don't know. It didn't, and I kind of just wanted to be done with it. So should I have DNF'd it? Maybe, but I pushed through, and that's probably why I did not enjoy it, because I made myself read something that I would have cared about. The next one I have an entire vlog on, and that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, the first one, by Heather Fawcett. I thought I was going to enjoy this. It was supposed to be marketed as like a super cozy fantasy, and everything I'd read about it sounded good. It's about fairies. It's this woman and this guy who's like studying stuff, and there's like a romance between the two of them. I did not like the way it was written. So this one was super hyped up. It was loved by so many people. Again, cozy fantasy was a very big buzzword. I want to say end of last year, beginning of this year. And this fell into that hype, and I thought this will be great. I'll just try a cozy fantasy and see what happens, because I'd read other books that I would consider cozy fantasies and enjoyed them. So like, it should have worked, but the hype did not live up. And again, it's the writing. I thought it could have, the writing made sense for the story and the character that was telling it. So I understand why it was written that way. And I don't think it would have made sense to be written any other way, but I still did not enjoy that type of writing. So it was very meh. And so there's more in the series. There's at least one more, maybe two at this point, and I'm done. I'm not going to continue. I just, again, if I didn't like the writing in the first one, I'm probably not going to like the writing in the rest. The plot was fine. It did get interesting later on in the story, but I don't know. It was the writing. It didn't work. The next one was Icebreaker by Hannah Grace, I think is her name. And this is a hockey romance. It was told to be incredibly smutty, which was fine. I thought this will be great. I am not a big sports romance person, but I'll give it a shot and see what happens. There was just something about it that I like felt really interested in. And the plot was fascinating. I was very invested in the characters. I was invested in the plot. There was a lot more to it. There was a lot of like mental health conversations in the story. There was a lot of conversation about eating disorders as well. Not necessarily like on purpose. Like, our main character's kind of put on a very strict diet. She's an ice skater, and she's put on a very strict diet by her partner, like her dancing partner. And she's like, sure, whatever. And then someone else looks at it and goes, no, 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 no. You are significantly malnourished. What's going on? So you've got like almost a mentally abusive relationship. So there's like a lot of conversations that are really important conversations. the smut was too much. There was way too much in this book. And yes, it was told to me as a really smutty story, which I expected, but like it was too much for even a smutty book. Like they did not need to have that much sex. Like there was no point. And yeah, that was my issue with it, is I liked the story and the plot, but the smut was like so much. So I went in thinking I was really going to enjoy it because of the smut, and the story was going to be lacking, and it was the complete opposite. But it was a disappointment because like I wanted it to be this great thing, and there were lots of moments where like there would be a smutty scene and I would be like, I'm just going to space out until it's done. And I would, and then I would go back to being able to somewhat enjoy the story. So for once, the smut did not work for me. The next one is Home is Where the Bodies Are. And this one I read when I was in my like thriller mystery stage. I read a bunch during the summer. It kind of like helped me stay up at night when I was doing like really early newborn feedings and things like that. And I don't really understand why this one didn't work for me, because like the plot sounded really interesting. It was these three siblings whose mother passes away and they're going through all of her stuff, and they find this old tape and it shows their dad with blood all over him. And they're like, now there's this big family secret. And so it's the three of them trying to figure out what the heck is going on. What secret did their parents hide? What's happening? So the reveal element was good. Like the actual, it's not really a whodunit, but whodunit situation is interesting, and I didn't see it coming, and I definitely had a what at like 2 a.m. moment. But it took us a long time to get there, and the characters drove me nuts. I'm not sure I liked a single sibling, especially since you're like basically going back and forth between, I think it's all three siblings' points of view. It's definitely the two sisters, but I think the brother also gets a POV. So it's all three of them. You pinpoint, or you kind of pinball back and forth between these perspectives. So it should be interesting, but it wasn't. And I felt like the buildup and this plot had a good ending, but it took a while to get there. So if it wasn't super short and I wasn't just like having it on to have it on, I think I might have DNF'd it. And I could see a lot of people giving up on this book early on because of that. But instead, I pushed through, and I did get a satisfying ending, but the work to get to the ending didn't feel like it was worth it. All right, so the next one is disappointing because of the author, and that is The True Love Experiment, and this is by Christina Lauren. I'm pretty sure every book I've read by Christina Lauren, I've given them like 4 or 5 stars. I think I very rarely give them a 3, and I'm pretty sure I gave this one a 3. This one, I think it was fine. It wasn't fantastic. It wasn't the best thing I've ever read. There were elements about it that I loved. The chemistry between our main two characters, fantastic. The tension and the conversations and the snarkiness between them, amazing. The best friend relationship, loved it. The smut scenes were lacking, especially because like this book follows a romance author. So you'd think that the romantic scenes were gonna be great. And I felt like the tension and all of the chemistry and everything that we had built up with these characters that we see in all of their other scenes were not in the smutty scenes. And it's like, okay, that doesn't make sense, because shouldn't the tension and the romance and the chemistry be in those scenes specifically? And it was these author duos like ode to romance novels. So like they were definitely some topics of conversation that were interesting and good to be hit on. There was like a lot of stuff about this book that worked and should have worked. And there was a lot about this book that just didn't for me. And it's on this list as a disappointment because of the authors. Like I said, have loved everything by this author. So the fact that I read a book that was just kind of like, is really surprising, especially because like at the time, I'm like 90% sure it was their most recent book. I think. And I don't own it. And like, I'm not sure I need to, like it is technically a sequel only because it follows like these two best friends. And so while I liked all the thought that went into this story, and I liked the reason they wrote this story. And like I said, I loved the chemistry between our main two characters when they were just talking and having conversations. That was fantastic, but just something didn't connect when it became some of the more romantic scenes. And it's super cheesy, like it has its cheesy moments, which you kind of expect about a book that's dedicated to the romance genre and romance readers and romance authors. So, you know, it's just one of those, like, some parts made sense, some parts didn't, and it should have been amazing. And it just wasn't. All right, the next one is Sasaki and Miyanu Volume 1. This is a male-male romance manga, and I picked this one up. Like, I picked up the first 3 volumes from my used book warehouse, and they should have been great. You know, like, it was about these 2 boys in high school. One of them was a little bit older, and one of them was discovering like a boy love manga for the first time, and it was their romance. And one is very much open about his feelings for the other one, while the other one is trying to figure out if they have feelings. And it was just, it was very confusing. It was a very confusing read. I'm always a fan of same-sex couples in my mangas because I don't see them very often, and so when I do see them, I'm like, I want that. And so I picked it up and I was super excited about that, and then it fell flat because, like, the romance really wasn't there, which is fine. It's a first volume, you kind of expect that's going to be built, but there was no, like, groundwork done. And I looked into it, and it's like a 10+ volume series, and it would have been pining and like back and forth, and there wasn't like an actual decision on the relationship until like the very end, and I did not want to go through 10+ volumes of that when they drove me nuts at the beginning. And also, like, the art style was confusing because there were characters that looked very, very similar, and like one of them is the love interest and then one of them is like a best friend, and I couldn't tell who was saying what and who was in what scene, because sometimes I'd be like, oh, they're having a conversation, oh wait, that's actually the best friend because they just mentioned this other person all of a sudden. And so I don't know, it just, the reading experience was not great, and so it made me not want to touch the rest of the series. So I expected this one to be at least decent, and it was just like, I don't know how else to describe it. It just did not work. Next one is actually the only book on this list that's actually a DNF, and that is The Woman in the Library. And I talked about this recently in my October and November wrap up, so go check it out because I read it near the end of, or at least I kind of read it at the end of October. The reason that this was a disappointment to me was because I was given one synopsis and it wasn't even that. What was supposed to happen was it was supposed to be this library, there was supposed to be a scream, everyone was supposed to be stuck there, and they were supposed to have found a dead body, and they were stuck in this library, and maybe one of them was a murderer. What actually ended up happening is it was this group of 4 people who happened to be in the same section of the library. They hear a scream, they go, oh no, what was that? The security guards look around, say, we don't really know, nothing happened, all right, you're good to go home. And they all just kind of like go out to lunch, become friends, and find out later that a dead body was found, and it happened to be one of them like knew her because their families run in the same circles. But it's them totally separated, and it's not like them stuck in the library trying to figure it out, which is what the back and the synopsis tells you it's going to be. So that was already a disappointment. And then the writing was very, very pretentious. It gave me, like, I said this before, it gave me like dark academia pretentious vibes. So like, if you like that, you might enjoy this. It's written from a writer's perspective, which was fine. But also, one thing that I forgot to mention in my wrap up was that in between the chapters, you would get like a letter from someone who is reading the story, as if the person who is writing it is sending these chapters to somebody, because the person who's writing it is Australian, as well as the main character, and she's sending it to a friend who's actually in like the city that it's set. So he was trying to like Americanize the story for her, so it made more sense. But it was like you couldn't figure out if the author was actually like going through this, or if what you were reading were the pages that were being sent to this person. It was really confusing, and so I just didn't want to give any more time to it, so I said goodbye. But I thought it was going to be this great mystery. I was during my mystery phase where I was really into all of that, and it disappointed for sure. Someone woke up from her nap and wanted to be included in the end of the video. But the last book that I want to talk about is Queen Bee, which is the prequel novella to the HMRC series, which is Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. I was conflicted going into this because I loved the first book. And I'd heard this, I thought this was a full-on novel. And then I'd heard it was a novella. And so I was like, oh, I'm already a little disappointed going in. But I figured it's a time period. It takes place during Tudor England. It's supposed to be like the setup of this magical world and the magical society that we get to know in the first book of the HMRC series. And it wasn't. Like, it was a disappointment to me because I felt like it was not needed, which is a pretty common statement that I've seen about this book. Is I thought it was going to be one thing because it follows a woman who fell in love with Anne Boleyn, who was part of her like inner circle as she's creating this like coven. But it wasn't mentioned that it was like, you know, a political party that like ends up being in control of everything, you know? It was unnecessary. I mean, it was a sapphic romance, kind of. So like that was nice, but the rest of the series is very queer to begin with. So it's not like that was lacking otherwise. So I don't know, like it just, the time period was a time period I liked. So it worked for me that way. I feel like it was marketed as one thing and it ended up not even being that. So like, it was fine, but it was so unnecessary. It was just an extra book that got released when we were all waiting for the third one, even though I haven't read the second one. And so, like, why not just get the third one out instead of writing another one? You know, like, I don't know. It just, I wanted it to be something, and it wasn't that. And that's it. That is a look at the books that I was unfortunately disappointed with this year. There were 10, and I think I was even pushing it, making a list of 10. But don't worry, the next videos you see will be the surprises that I had this year. So not necessarily favorites of the year, but definitely books that I went in either not expecting a lot or expecting a lot, and it still exceeded those expectations. So I hope you enjoy that one coming your way, and I hope you enjoyed this one. So if there's any books, of course, as always, if there's any books that I mentioned in this video that you have read, let me know all your thoughts down below. Or if you'd like to talk about a book that like just didn't work for you this year, a disappointment, a book, I mean, you could do like a hated book even if you wanted, but definitely a book that disappointed you. You thought it was gonna be one thing and it was not. Please let me know all your thoughts. But if you liked this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe it down below if you'd be part of this awesome growing family. I've just got all my social media and other fun links down there, so don't forget to check all that out. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!